Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Noise. This is Shawn. I'm with Michelle, and we're going to be talking about content marketing today. So, Michelle, let's start with your preference in terms of what kind of content you like to consume. In terms of what medium do you like to listen, watch, read, and what do you find as compelling?
Yeah, so when it comes to consuming content, there's just a couple personal interests that I have. It's anything in the outdoors, or it's anything related to music. And I think when it comes to content for me, I really appreciate stuff that's engaging, or it's giving me tips on how to, maybe experience something new, especially in the outdoors world. If I'm new to backpacking, I'm definitely researching blogs that give me tips on how to pack a bag properly, where to go, just like a survival kit. So that's kind of the content that I focus on. And on the music side, I definitely enjoy reading reviews on new albums and stuff, but that's not necessarily content. But yeah, I don't know. I guess on your side, what do you enjoy consuming?
I mean, I like short content. I come from a journalism background, so sometimes, I tend to think that shorter is better. If I want to read something long, I'm just going to go pick up a book. So I like small, to the point pieces of content. I think, when it comes to products and people that are using content to market, especially on the e-commerce side, I want to know more about what I'm getting ready to buy or invest in. So kind of educational content is important to me. For a while, I wasn't really kind of a YouTube guy just because just wasn't. If I'm going to watch something that's video, I'm going to watch something that's on the TV or live or something like that. But, I've started watching a little bit more on YouTube just from a, educational, instructional side of things. But I think, videos, great, but also sometimes there's the barrier in that somebody's browsing a website and don't have headphones, or they're, just can't listen to the audio. So I think sort of written content needs to kind of always, be there. It just can't be too long is sort of my kind of rule. And, the more I'm scrolling, the more I'm about to bounce. So.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, same thing. I very much enjoy my content being broken down into bullet points, something bold to capture your attention, and then a couple sentences following up on it. Just kind of get to the point.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about when we, discuss SEO in terms of best practices and, having headers and, not having paragraphs too long. All those sorts of things are, both from an SEO standpoint, but also readability. Which, if you want to read more about readability, we have a article on the website on the pillargroup.com blog all about readability and SEO. Now, kind of sort of flipping that, when you approach, writing content, let's just say it's a blog article here at Pitler Group, how do you start off? What's kind of your process for creating an article?
Well, brainstorming a topic, typically the first thing, but I do like to spend some time researching it. Kind of just seeing what else is on the web, kind of see how else people are trying to write about this topic and what's their advice and how they spun it the way that they did. And then another thing too is I really appreciate incorporating statistics and any kind of data. I guess to me is something that's interesting. I want fast facts that kind of show evidence or support what I'm writing about. So that's kind of the first steps is doing that, and then I usually spend a moment, laying it all out, my thoughts, just like any kind of article that you write, just lay it out and then just start writing, and then I guess this goes back into SEO as well, but, making sure I'm getting the right links and I'm, incorporating words that I think will drive people to the blog as well. I don't know. I think is your thought process similar, or how do you usually approach those?
I'm more of a just sit down and start writing.
Yeah.
Kind of person. And, I want to make sure I spend time thinking about the end reader and what they, if it was me and I was reading this article, what would make me enjoy it, what would make me not, and just sort of start forming sentences like that. I try not to think too much about it just because then it becomes forced. That's just my sort of the way I do it. I think the challenge with content is not having your feelings hurt when it's not viewed or watched or read right away. I think, something we always talk about here is you kind of have to dedicate yourself and make an investment. And the book Traction, they talk about sort of 6 months, and sort of you can't just start determining success or failure after you've published 2 articles and a video. But I think it's just important to really kind of dedicate yourself. We do content every Thursday, and if you're not consistent, it's just not going to be as effective. And you kind of have to force yourself to be regimented. It's not like people are going to be sitting around refreshing their browser waiting for something, but saying you're going to do it on a certain day, every week or 3 or 4 times a week, just really make sure that you're doing it and being consistent. And as opposed to all of a sudden you miss 2 weeks and then you're kind of running out of steam.
Yeah, it's a good point. Going back to keep consistent with it. It's going to take some time. I mean, even Traction, the book that we're referring to, it talks about how, it could take upwards of 6 months to a year for you to really see any momentum come from it. And so it's, I guess, something you got to stay motivated in. And I guess to that point too, how do you find yourself keeping motivated as we're putting out content every week? Do you ever get fatigued, or what's your creative process?
I mean, I think finding niche things to write about, and things that I'm interested in and things that maybe I want to learn more about. It's almost like I'm using the writing process or the speaking process to learn. And if I'm doing that, then I know that I'm thinking like the end user, because I'm trying to educate and inform. So I think trying to find different things to talk about, niche things, or if we're just talking about SEO rather than just talking about keywords or meta tags, sort of talking about readability, and just sort of doing an offshoot of that, because I think sometimes the worst videos and the worst blogs are ones that are just too broad, because then you can't cover everything in one article. So I think it's just important to kind of find that smaller thing, the interesting thing, and it's also going to help in search and everything else, because if you're writing about something that not everybody else is writing about, you're going to have sort of the authority on that. If you're just writing about alt tags, that's been done a few times.
Right. Which I feel like as we've gone through this creative process too with, Content Thursday, there's definitely a lot of things where I'm like, okay, there's a lot of help articles. So how do we, I guess, put a spin on that instead of the very generic oh, this is how you do it. How can we make it more engaging and, actually attract the user to it?
I mean, I wrote down what is everyone else not doing. So kind of say, well, if everyone else was going to jump off a cliff, would you? So if everybody else was going to write about alt tags, would you? And I think the answer should be no.
Yeah.
And I think, when you talk about the 6 months to a year, and, just because it's not getting sort of viewed up front, it does kind of pay off later. And it could be, content, everything on the internet lives forever.
Oh, yeah.
So, and it could be an article, it could be a video that all of a sudden is, discovered 2 years from now, and, maybe it goes viral, which we will be talking about in the future in terms of how to make things viral and what they are, even though I'm not a big fan of the word because it sounds negative to me.
Yeah. Well, and also I know in the past we've taken articles that have been written and then update it if it's been a year or so or a little bit longer. It's nice that you can update that kind of stuff if it's still relevant content and just keep it up with the times, which I think you've had experience doing that for a few of our clients, right?
Yeah, and especially, content that was, maybe written before we started working with them and needs, help in terms of new images and headers and, sentence structure, things like that. But it is nice to kind of take something, especially, you were talking about statistics and fact-based, being able to update it so it's not, well, in 1994 census, just being able to sort of freshen it. You don't have to, reinvent the wheel every time. And that's kind of the nice thing about, putting out shorter content, is, get little snippets out there. We have somebody in-house that's going to start doing some business tips, and it's just going to be 1 to 2 minute videos. And
Perfect.
all of a sudden you have 30 of those, and you kind of have a collection. And I think, sometimes less is more, and then you have more of everything because you're doing a lot of smaller things, and that's sometimes easier, than forcing yourself to produce something, really long.
Well, and especially like, I mean, going back to our point too, talking about how we prefer things that are, short and to the point. It's nice to be able to like break it up that way. And then it's like you have this whole gathering. So it's like, I mean, you could binge it if you're a listener and you want to like learn all the tips. You just wait until they're all released. But I think that's a good way of handling it. Yeah.
When you talk about statistics and facts, how do you go about finding them, verifying them? What's sort of your process that way?
Yeah. So in my research process, usually you kind of stumble upon most of that stuff, but I also like to try and find, I don't really like to dive necessarily into like published, studies and whatnot, but you do want to fact check and make sure that you're getting it from a trusted source, someone that's clearly done it. And a lot of the times they do link to the actual published article or the study. And so usually my thing if I'm going to post anything about it, I make sure that I verify numerous sources, that it's coming from it's accurate, it's been tested multiple times. I mean, not everything, statistics is funny because it's not 100% accurate. Like something could change. So stats change all the time, so you got to keep up on it. But I definitely make sure that you verify with other sources and you're getting the general consensus that it is accurate. But I think when it comes to numbers too, I think a lot of people, and I know me especially, I don't really want to read about it in like a lot of articles, and that's why I really prefer like infographics. I don't know if you feel the same, but I feel like a lot of times I come across articles that have that just thrown in there. They're like, oh, here's a couple sentences about like what we're talking about, and then here's a fun infographic with all these stats, and you're like, oh wow, I can easily pick up on what you're trying to tell me, and I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was just thinking, you mentioned infographics. I think it's important to, realize that content is not just articles. There's so many other ways to create and deliver content. So I think about, social media, and, you create a cool infographic and you put it on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then, that's publishing content.
Yeah.
And that's, getting something out there. It's organic and it lives forever. So, when you're starting your content strategy, it can't just be, I'm going to write 3 articles a week and that's going to be it. You kind of have to, just like everything we talk about, it has to be sort of multi-channel, and everything has to help sort of each other. But you can produce content that's small, that doesn't take a lot of time, but is going to provide value. And I think infographics are a great example of that, just because you can get them on Instagram and Facebook, and that does have value and does help extend your brand, just because you are educating and informing people.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I guess for a personal question, do you have a preference on, do you have a favorite medium, I guess, for delivering content marketing? Like, do you prefer podcasting, videos?
I have no real preference. I think it really depends on the topic.
Yeah.
Some topics are a lot easier to sort of write, and a lot of that when it's research based. I think with video and podcasting, it can be a little more off the cuff and not quite as scripted, which lends itself to various topics.
Right.
When you're talking about SEO, that's a little easier to write an article about than necessarily talk about for half an hour.
Right.
So to me, I kind of start with the topic and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm kind of the same way. It's nice to be able to also, I guess, think about if it's a topic I really like. I'm like, okay, do I think I can talk about this for 15 minutes versus can I do research or
right. All right. So that's another episode of Cutting Through the Noise, talking about content. To find out more about Traction Channels, marketing in general, and what we have going on here at Pintler Group, check us out at pintlergroup.com. You can also follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel.